interestingly, when I got this text from Honora, I got a text from her that she wasn't going to come. And I've had some lengthy dialogue with her about no last-minute cancellations. You know, and I did it, at least according to my sensitivity and sentiment. I thought I did it in a very sensitive and gentle way, and you know, didn't make her wrong for anything. But I really tried to share and impress upon her the idea that you wouldn't go to a dinner date or to an appointment with to see a movie with someone and cancel in the last minute. You know. Now I do understand that people tend to think of groups, no matter what their size is, but they tend to think of groups as something that goes on whether they're there or not. And, you know, I completely understand that and have looked at things in that way, looked at groups and group participation in that way as well. Go ahead, Gus, you can go up there.
A little space for you.
He'll probably go. Yeah.
Hi.
So when she sent me that text, you know, I didn't react, but I wanted to respond to her, and I did, and he's going for the lap. That's quite. He must be cold. He's a little cold, I think. That's why he's doing that. That's.
Oh my God, he's so cute. How old is Gus?
He's up there. He's 17.
Wow.
17 going on 18.
I know 2 16-year-old cats, so it's nice to meet one that's. I'm going to take a picture.
Anyway.
17 going on 18.
Yeah. And what am I trying to get to here? So.
She didn't take a while, or
No, she did. She's pretty good because I've had very clean exchanges with her. You know, I mean, I'm not expecting anybody to agree with me or not, and I try to make it explicitly clear that I'm not judging them or making them wrong. It's just impossible in regard to the matter of a group. It's impossible to run a group unless there's some sense of responsible participation in it, much like you would if you were meeting somebody for dinner, or if you had a date. Yeah, or you made a professional appointment with someone. You know, you generally give them the courtesy of canceling a day before, letting them know you're not going to come. So, no, she received it very well. But she brought up the idea of emergency. You know, it's an emergency. And I wanted to address that too, because that's, you know, emergency ideas that fall into the category of emergency certainly happen to all of us, and there are things that happen under that category where we have to respond to that, and that might mean breaking the commitment or the agreement to show up somewhere, or to, certainly in the group. But I had a few go-arounds with her, and one of the things that came up and came up very strong is first of all, everyone has a problem with commitment, because commitment is akin to, close to the deeper possibility or the deeper potential of a greater consistency, right? Consistency is the idea of being consistent is it really has a connection to the deeper underpinnings of God's unwavering, unshakable mind, will, where everything is perfectly stable and unwaveringly so. Not to be confused with boring and plain, just profoundly and powerfully and creatively stable and unchanging. And a large aspect of developing the sense of personal responsibility, personal and then shared responsibility, collective responsibility, really brings into influence the need for a more conscious overview about how we manage our affairs in life, right? Because there's no limit to how much respect, courtesy, goodwill we can show others through that understanding that everything I do matters and says something about what's possible. So, and as that skill is developed, as that understanding rooted in unwavering, uncompromising, unconditional responsibility, not fault or blame, none of that judgmental stuff, just I'm responsible. I may see directly how I caused something to come into being, or I may not, but that doesn't enter into it. I still know I'm responsible. And when it gets to the deeper levels of brightening up the mystery of our unconsciousness, that point of view sheds a lot of essential light into the matter and circumstance of our history or present and as we go forward, right? Because as we become more willing to just be responsible, even when my understanding, my Jeffrey or human understanding, doesn't seem to connect the dots, right? I still maintain the sense I'm responsible for it. That ultimately brings into awareness that those deeper learning occasions when I begin to see more clearly how that did come into being. You know, now that may fit my explanations and my egocentric understanding or not. But I've found that over time, that unwavering, unconditional, uncompromising approach to I'm just responsible for everything I see, I seem to get a more accelerated pace of insight into how things happened in my life in terms of as I look back into what I call my past and how things are happening now. I see the connections, and I think that the ability to see into all of that becomes possible when you just accept responsibility. You're inviting a brighter light into your life experience, and that brings illumination to all of it. So it's a win-win. It's totally a gain and by no means a loss having that unwavering approach. And one of the things that I've seen over time and continue to see is that emergencies in my life generally came out of the more murky areas of my unconscious. In other words, the more conscious I become about things, the more I hold myself accountable and responsible, seems like the effect is less emergency. Now, even in those circumstances and situations that go under the category of an emergency, there's a lot less reacting and more responding with clear overview regarding the circumstance. So that sort of blocks the ego from entering in and bringing its palette of guilt-ridden ideas and anxiety into the situation. So, you know, for instance, when my mother had her crisis a few years ago, which I saw coming, it was pretty clear. I was able to respond to it and not.
What was her crisis?
Well, she wasn't really taking care of herself, and there were symptoms that were appearing, episodes she was having that to me seemed like if she doesn't deal with it, it's going to lead to an emergency crisis, which it did. My father had to call an ambulance, and I remember about 2 weeks before it happened, she had an episode of numbness and inability to walk in her leg, and I said, you know, clearly there's some kind of blockage going on, and if you deal with it right away, you may be able to head off an emergency situation that's going to land you in the hospital, that could land you in the hospital. And she said, you're probably right, I'll think about it. And I assume she maybe thought about it or didn't, but 2 weeks later, she, you know, had another episode of crisis. My father called an ambulance. They rushed her off to the hospital, emergency room, emergency surgery. She had a bypass. They did a leg artery graft or something from somewhere into the leg that was blocked. And it was the beginning of the end for her. This was around Thanksgiving, Halloween, and she passed. I think it was like December 6th or something. So why am I bringing that up? Well, I'm bringing that up because the way I dealt with that was pretty impressive to me as it was all happening, because I just sort of did what needed to be done. I was very sensitive, very respectful, very supportive. I ran the group the whole time. I don't know if you guys, I don't think you were in the group at the time. I'm not sure if you were. No. And it was a pretty large group at the time. And I remember coming back from New Jersey, which is where she was, the hospital she was in, and just being so grateful for the experience I was having. I mean, certainly not the trauma and the emergency of her illness and all of that, but whatever was bringing about this ability to deal with that in a way that was impressed me. You know, it was clear that there was more. There was a lot more involved than Jeffrey in the whole dynamic of, you know, I just felt like I was being held up through the whole thing, and I was able to share in the group really in a powerful and very potent way, you know, during the group sessions. I mean, I'd barely get back in on time, and the group would occur, and it would be so right on topic, you know, so perfect for the whole idea of miracle-mindedness and miraculous thinking as this whole thing unfolded. Anyway, so it's a long story for a very short idea, but what I was really trying to get across to Honora, and I think I did, was the idea that the more you lean into your sense of responsibility, your willingness to be responsible, no matter how whether your mind accepts it, objects to it, rejects it, resists it, but nonetheless, to be responsible anyway, what that produces is a situation and a lifestyle experience where there seems to be less emergency. And I think that's a really useful thing to learn because there isn't anything happening that we're not responsible for. Whether we understand our responsibility in the matter or not. And clearly the deeper understanding of responsibility eliminates all feel bad about the situation. And it allows the natural due course to present itself as just natural due course. For instance, I don't know why we get all so bent out of shape about when somebody passes, because it's happening all the time. You know, I mean, we've seen it since we were little children. It's been a feature and a part of our lives, and certainly the proper understanding, you know, having to do with higher intelligence, informs us that there isn't anything happening here that's threatening. You know, what's really occurring is that transition, that passing is really a blessing. You know, although that worldly mind is deeply embedded and invested in the idea of it being a problem, you know, a frightening thing in and of itself. So, you know, responsibility is a profoundly informing experience, and I encourage it and try to reinforce those principles as much as I can in any and all the situations of our life, because I think we all have these categories where we reserve the right to be afraid or worry or anxious or you know, to go into crisis having to do with an emergency. But you know, in reality, there's really no emergency to any of it. It's just the stuff that happened, that seems to happen here, and for the remainder of my time here, my need to manage myself and those possibilities when and if they arise.
It would make the situation a lot more difficult. It does make the situation a lot more difficult if you're blaming somebody, because you're not thinking with God.
Yeah, definitely.
Or if I'm blaming the world, I'm not thinking with God. I'm not getting any insight into how do I respond to this situation, because I'm putting all my energy into it's not my fault. I don't want to have this, etc., etc.
Yeah, largely it's a distraction. Emergency is a distraction. It indicates or reveals areas where we allow the ego to govern our experience, rather than just naturally and once and for all rising above all of that stuff, all of it, no matter what form it might occur in. So,
it's a much better spot to be working from.
It's the only way you can manage and maneuver through the experience, whatever it is, in a way that it has some utility and productivity to it, in a way that you can learn from it and share the learning, right? So there's help that you're gaining and help that you're sharing.
Yeah, I try to immediately sort of say, okay, Holy Spirit, show me why, because there's got to be a reason this is happening, and then it just calms me down in the situation that, maybe leads to a solution or just some surprise that makes sense to me, that is, maybe I met someone new that I wouldn't have otherwise, or provided something I wouldn't have otherwise. So sometimes just asking that question shifts it out of emergency altogether.
Right, because you're shifting away from the ego.
Yeah.
You're remembering that there is another way to see this.
It's amazing what opens up from that perspective. Yeah.
And the whole idea, the whole idea of the miraculous is to give you access to peace now. to an ability to not be in any way impacted or affected by all of that stuff that seems to be happening and suggesting blame, shame, loss, pain, any of that.
Right, it's almost like an emergency is the thought that this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And if it's, maybe it is supposed to be happening, who knows? But
Well, and
that's where all the reactivity would come from.
yeah,
and
exactly.
the greater question, what is actually
What is
happening?
what is even
What is
happening?
actually
Yeah.
really happening?
Right.
I have a perception and a story about what I think is happening, but what is actually happening?
Right.
As that most sobering and penetrating of inquiries or questions, which allows you to just shift out of the whole searching for reasons and answers and explanations for things that are essentially meaningless. You know.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of gaining an insight, a response, an experience that's completely beyond the need for any familiar explanation to me. And essentially, that's what the peace of God is. It's pure, perfect comfort and assurance, beyond what words or concepts or sentence structures can provide in any way. It's a direct experience of that presence, which is the answer in and of itself. That aspect of being united or one with the creative source of all creativity, in which there are no issues or problems or explanations necessary.
Mm.
I mean, that's essentially what peace is. And peace informs you of all of that and more in whatever need you may have for explanation as you become more and more accepting and comfortable with that as your goal. The more you simply see all things, you know, as I'm here only to share, to experience, to remember the peace of God. Peace is my only goal. Then there's a lot less activity that goes on up here. A lot less reasoning and figuring things out, and more of a mounting and expanding sense of comfort in the unfathomable experience of what we call peace, which is not a thing, but a living experience. You know, it's
peace is also the answer to all those issues that I think I have to deal with. I think that's where we get. That's where it's backward in the world, right? We say, well, I'll get peace once I've dealt with this situation.
Yes.
But it's important to always remember that peace is the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, peace is the way, exactly. It is the goal. It is the goal realized.
Yeah.
It in a sense, inverts the mind so that what matters only and what matters most is now recognized first and foremost. Whereas before it was always after everything else got dealt with or responded to. You know, it awakens the mind from its preoccupation with what really does not matter, so that everything that does matter can be experienced experientially in the here and now.
In spirituality, they talk a lot about alignment, you know, and I never quite understood what that meant, but I'm realizing that it means peace with what is. I mean, that's the alignment.
Absolutely. And the idea of ascendance is that alignment, which is really non-linear. It has little or nothing to do with up and down. or any kind of plane of access. Ascendance is really the God principle. It's God remembered. Ascendance is that alignment with God in which all things are understood. All things are known, from which a non-linear, non-conceptual experience unfolds, eliminating and lessening your need for explanations and reasons and more logic, a new logic to connect the dots. It relieves you of all of that. Because knowledge, the peace of God, which is what knowledge ultimately reveals to you, is everything. There isn't anything beyond peace. Peace is the way. It is the answer. It is the experience that everyone seems to be longing for and seeking, and only not finding because of their own peculiar inversion, conscious inverting of the facts, so that the fundamental principle of what they are, what we are, and who we are gets overshadowed by the distortions, the illusions, and of the illusory mind. So anyway, so the idea of responsibility, the idea of holding oneself accountability which comes from responsibility, has no shame, no blame, none of that anxiety-ridden stuff in it. It's just, I don't see it, but I'll sit with it. I'll just let it be and accept the idea that I am responsible. Produces a rite of passage, an ability to move beyond those distorting, distracting influences of the ego. Gives you a way to align. Responsibility calls your mind to align itself, to ascend, to rise up, out, and away from its own slumber, its own mind wandering, from what doesn't matter. It gives you your mind. It gives you back your mind and your own mindful presence to be able to be in it and not of it. So
there's this really interesting documentary about Scientology that I saw.
Yeah. Was it the one on Netflix or something?
My Scientology movie, I think it's called. And you remember the scene where they're sitting and the teacher is basically trying to surprise the student and see if the student cannot react to anything that he does. And so he, yells really like this or does that, and if the student flinches, it's fail. You failed.
Right.
You failed.
We got to do it again.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, but what is the point of that? I mean, when we're talking about peace, we're not talking about controlling our reactions to, we might have the reaction, but it doesn't matter. If we're at peace, the reaction can be seen and witnessed and loved even, and okay, oh yeah, I'm feeling that again. Okay, wait a minute, hold on a second. I can be at peace here. I don't need to follow that. But it was so interesting, like the Scientology thing is so
well, that's characteristic of how the ego distorts anything and uses it to promote and propagate more time and more existence. You're not there yet. And I mean, you can hear the same rhetoric in the Buddhist culture and in the Buddhist in any of the religions. It's all, in Christianity, you're a sinner. Course in Miracle people are famous for their version of not being there yet.
Yeah, sure.
And it really makes the process unnecessarily slow and indirect. Because, because as you willingly move away from the idea of not being there yet, move away from the illusion of being incomplete and not whole, what you discover is you are whole and complete. Because your source is unconditional, so is your genuine and authentic experience unconditional. And the quicker you can just accept that, the more evidence of that can enter into your experience, because you're not so fiercely rejecting it, unconsciously rejecting it, arguing on, giving your energy to the idea of no. Not yet. Everything just works a lot smoother and a lot easier if you just accept the truth. And all that goes with the truth, the sense of being responsible, even if I don't know or see how. Because what it does is it provides an immediate way out of an extremely lengthy and unproductive process of trying to find the way out through achieving some condition of which there's never been any evidence that anybody ever achieved that condition. You could just let go of the whole struggle, the whole burden associated with human existence, and let the truth be true, and then experience in a much more aligned, immediate, present tense experience the evidence for it. Right? All the evidence follows your consent to it. If you don't consent to it, the evidence can't get in, because the mind is fiercely, either consciously or unconsciously, rejecting the idea of it. So it's there, but you don't know it's there, because you don't want to know. The principle of not wanting, of discovering, the only reason I seem not to know is because I don't want to know. Because I've long hidden from myself the idea that I don't want to know. I don't really want to know. I want to seek, but I want my seeking to be an experience of never finding, right? Because genuine and true seeking is you seek and you find right now. Right? And we often talk about the idea that the mind is always getting what it wants. Right? Yeah. Everything that's manifesting itself in our life is always the reflection of what we're choosing one way or another. Nothing happens by coincidence or by accident. The mind is all powerful, and it's working away, and to the degree that you subscribe to the idea of not being there, i.e. unconscious, then your own handiwork is going to be invisible to you. You won't see it. You won't see your own mind at work. When in fact you have to see your own mind at work in order to get beyond it. Yes?
I mean,
yeah.
The course is, I think, if you're getting in this system, I mean, the idea of there being an out there to point fingers at, that starts to disappear rather quickly.
And as well,
it never gives you an exception to that rule.
Hence the disappearance of the universe.
Right.
Everybody's world, everybody's perceivable world, everybody's universe has to disappear. Now that doesn't in any way, to the ego that seems like a loss and cause for anxiety, but it shouldn't trouble you at all, because the loss of your universe, i.e. my universe of illusions, false perceptions, is not the loss of anything. In fact, out of that comes my reunification with what I am and who I am. All those qualities that I've been saying I wanted and have been seeking for I get to have them now. And then live out my time-space experience for as long as it lasts. But from an experience of being fulfilled rather than trying to get fulfilled. Everything works much easier that way. Werner Erhard used to call that, he used to say, that's riding the horse in the direction that it's already going. You know, it's just going with the flow if you understand what the flow is. And that's really what the beauty and the miraculous gift of A Course in Miracles, of this understanding, this teaching really is, because it's an unequivocal call to wake up, to have everything that you really and truly long for and seek, to have it now as the centerpiece, as the core of your experience, even while you seem to be in a body or in a world inhabited by other bodies. It doesn't matter. Right? That way you get to hobnob with the powers to be. You get to rub elbows with the co-creator. And through that that infinitely powerful, potentizing association, share creation, i.e. co-create along with him, even when and as you seem to be in the world, so that your experience of being in the world becomes greater than what being in the world seems to be all about. Right? All the things, all the mundane things that you choose to do or get involved in work, romance, all becomes a means to share a greater experience of beyond all that. Even while you seem to be in the middle of all that. Right? Fundamentally folding you back into the experience that nothing is really the way I think it is. Which is one of the more comforting, embracing, powerful, uplifting, healing of experiences as you seem to bump along in the world, right? Is realizing that, holy shit, this is holy shit. It's not that it's not what it looks like. Even when it looks okay. It's more than that. There's an experience that's unfolding here that's incomprehensibly powerful and beautiful and sobering and joyful right here that accompanies you everywhere you go as yourself, because that's your nature. Those are the energies of the truth in you, of the being in you, of God's creative expression in you. I mean, these aren't just ideas that you are a co-creator with the creator of all life. It's the truth. And you have the right to experience it. Even if you detect, and it's important along the way as we go to really stay awake and become aware of those areas where we're a little uneasy about that idea, or where, you know, it seems like it could be a little distressing. You know, like, what does that mean? What do I have to do? It doesn't mean any of that. It means something far beyond that, in the most enriching, the most encouraging, the most grateful of ways. I mean, it's hard to imagine that the creator of all life is grateful, has nothing but gratitude for you, for what you are and who you are, who knows you in the full splendor of reality, the glory of what you are. Terms like glory and power, these are your attributes. And you have the right to know them. And you have the right to know them and to gain the beneficence of those experiences, which are nothing but deeply nurturing and nourishing in the most personal and expansive of ways. You have the right to know them without any further delay. Now, God is not going to twist your arm about any of that. You are required to know it, but not in any kind of like pushy way or forceful way. You're required to know it because you are the knowledge of it. Does that make sense? There's no option there. I mean, God, who is all-knowing, who is omnipresent and omnipotent, created you out of his own stuff, right? It's kind of like what Carl Sagan meant when he said, your star stuff. All the stuff of the universe is what you are. Everything that you look and wonder about out there is in here. So, the beatitudes of God's infinitely loving presence is within you right here, right now, and you can know it. And that's what Einstein meant when he said the only thing incomprehensible about the universe is that you can comprehend it. You can comprehend it. Now, your mind may still object to the idea of being one with God, but you can still know the reality of it by allowing your mind to go through its cycles of tension and release, as you migrate and shift more and more frequently and consistently out of that dynamic, out of that mythology, out of that container, which doesn't really exist. It's just a thought or an idea you're having. So, the wonderful poet T.S. Eliot, in one of his poems, he says, that humankind can't take too much reality. And there's some validity to the idea of that, because the consciousness that thinks itself human and is identified and bound to that system of limitations must reject that idea, the idea of reality, because in and of itself it's an unreal idea. So one of the defenses against the truth of reality and your place in reality, your oneness with it, shows up in the forms of tensions and forms of resistance where you seem to be not all that comfortable with the acceptance of yourself, of your power, of your glory, of your perfectly loving and lovable reality. Like right now, I seem to have a sense that you're having maybe something come up about that,
I have a work situation where I have a schedule at work, but I also have a program that I run, and I have responsibility.
Is the program that you run within the work environment?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a sense of responsibility for the program.
Yeah.
I'm always it will always go well because I'm responsible for that. Always make sure it's covered, like that kind of thing. My schedule, though, I don't feel responsible to at all. Like, I'll come in late because I know I'm being responsible for the program. But it doesn't really work either to come in late, and then I feel guilty.
Right.
And I try to rework it this way and that way, and I've had like a buddy system with someone, like we'll both be on time for things. Like, I've really tried to work on it, and it still remains this kind of...
Well, let me ask you this. Your sense of being responsible for the program that you manage, where you've been given authority and managerial overview about that. Does that in any way to you suggest that that's more important than being on time?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That's my justification.
yeah, well that's your problem, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because
Thanks, but is it?
well, well, it's a problem if you make it a problem, and somehow you're invested in it having be a problem, or else it wouldn't go on.
Right.
You would show up
Right.
on time, or you would show up late, and it wouldn't be a problem.
That would be a problem.
Yeah. Now, that's probably the harder way to get it to work.
Oh,
is,
if I show up and say, well, it doesn't bother me, so it's fine.
right.
Uh-huh.
Because that involves other people,
Yeah.
and they don't, usually in work environments, it's like as a host for this kind of group thing, I've tried to get people to number 1 attend, which is really difficult. And understandably, I'm not saying that anybody should come. But once people say they want to come, that they deem there to be value there, and they want to do it, then it's only a matter of time before it becomes problematic for them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they've already established the ground of being that they want to do it and that it is of value to them, ultimately it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm just suggesting some ideas here.
No, I'm totally
One of the things you might do is just be unconditionally on time.
I'm afraid you're going to say that.
Yeah. Until you don't have any energy about it at all. Until it doesn't matter to you whether you're on time or not on time. Until you don't even look at your watch. You're just on time.
Yeah.
Right? Then that might or could simultaneously lead to you being able to work out some arrangement with your administrators, the people that are responsible for you, your boss, or whoever you answer to in the company, so that they see, well, yeah, Ilse, you're really getting the job done, and you are fulfilling your function in that, and we have no problem there. And obviously, you have demonstrated you can show up on time, and there might be some opening there where you can say, if I can get where you could present them with an idea, the likes of which might be, well, is there any way I could be responsible for my department and for getting all that work done, but to be able to do it on my own time? Now, there's a lot of that kind of thing in the work environment, in the corporate environment today, where people very often don't even go to the office anymore. They just work out of their pajamas at home.
Right, and you're sort of, what I'm hearing is that when I'm stuck in the problem of
it can't move.
It can't move.
Yeah,
right?
because you've made it an issue.
I'm attached to that. I'm in that world of
the problematic. You've somehow bound yourself to this no-win situation where, yes, I'm getting the job done, but there's another side to it. And the other side to it is I have to show up then or on time. I have to keep a schedule, even though I can adequately get the job done. Just like if everybody wants their cake and they want to eat it too, right? Everybody wants to have it their way. But life doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that you sort of, if you want to operate and gain an experience of unconditional experience where anything can happen, you generally first have to show up in the environment as they're asking you to participate in it, and then demonstrate those unconditional aspects in that environment, out of which comes a transformation and a shift, out of which you may or may not be able to amend the situation so that it reflects more of your lifestyle preferences. But the first and foremost is you got to show up.
Right.
You know, you got to show up the way they want me to show up so that, you know, I have a beginning that indicates to them that I am respecting all the opportunity that I've been given, that there's a soulful experience of gratitude there. Not that I have to prove it, I just have to demonstrate it. Out of which comes a greater field of possibilities. Now, maybe they won't give you that ability. Maybe or that ability to change your schedule and have it more to your liking as long as you get the job done. But a whole lot of interesting things can happen from that state of bringing your best to that situation as they're asking you to.
Yeah.
One is, you know, you may get a call out of the blue from someone not in the room, not in that company, who offers you another job.
Right.
Or you might meet, you know, all these unusual connections could begin to present themselves to you because you are fulfilling your worldly agreement, but doing it from an unconditional place. See, right now you're doing it out of a conditional, from a conditional point of view, and that's gonna...
Like, I'll do it, but I'll do it my way, which is conditional. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. You know, well, you're saying, well, I'm getting the job done, therefore I don't have to show up on time. And it's a good, I understand the reasoning. You are getting the job done. But they may not see it that way.
And it's a mental construct anyway. But, yeah.
You know, I have learned so much over the past, well, over all of whatever this is, but I'm just thinking during my period of time when I inherited my parents' house after my father passed and had to manage this property, which I had never done really anything like that before. And had to really fast learn that, you know, get with the way it is and be right about all of that right from a soulful perspective, in order to shift the dynamic of the situation in a way that was more consistent with a higher and a greater potential. Like from the very beginning, the thing that comes to mind is I had a family friend who I hired as a contractor to renovate the house. And then the first tenant came as a renter, who turned out to be another tradesperson, a guy in the business of insulating homes, that kind of thing. And these two guys conflicted. They hooked up in a negative and oppositional way early on. And I was kind of caught in a rock between a hard place. I was involved in the renovation of the house with this contractor family friend who I like a lot. And at the same time, I was already committed to this guy renting the upstairs apartment in the house. And I had to find a way, you know, to get them to work together. And they quickly were so at odds. The one guy, the family friend contractor, was renovating the house, just wanted to walk away. He just so disliked the guy who had rented, taken out a year's lease with the upstairs apartment. So I had to find a way, you know, to share the idea of a miracle with them, and I did, and they both bit into it enough to allow it to be, which ultimately produced a condition where it worked. you know, for the duration of it. And then I rented the lower apartment once I got that apartment done. And, you know, to be able to really see that there was this place of unconditional understanding that could support all these things into turning out in a better way. Right? We don't have to throw the towel in. There's a way that we can work through this, and we can all learn something in the process. You know, I went through the same thing with the downstairs and the upstairs, and the house got renovated. And this family friend continued over the years that I managed the property to be my go-to guy when there was a need for him. And out of his trust in me, he got along and developed a manageable, workable relationship with the upstairs tenant who thought he owned the house. I mean, it was really a unique experience, you know. Periodically, I had to remind him in a gentle but firm way that I was the owner of the house. And, you know, I was the one that made the decisions about what's going to happen and what isn't. But I'm just trying to point out that I didn't make an issue of it, because had I made an issue of it, it would have broke. It just would have broke, you know. And the same thing happened again with the people who rented out the downstairs of the house when my father went into assisted living. Actually, both of those things happened at around the same time. And then those two tenants went into clashing with each other. And, you know, there was always something. But I found that this unconditional principle, can-do principle, beyond my own understanding, would suffice. It would bring about a way. And, you know, it did for all of the years that I managed the property. Now, I'm sure there was a way to make more money from the property if my goal was just to make money, you know, and... but that wasn't my goal. You know, even though the property made money. Didn't make a lot of money, but it made money. It did not lose money. Mm-hmm. And the level, the life experience, the lifestyle experience of that property was elevated. And, you know, it was self-evident. You know, the house kept getting improved. Mm-hmm. And tenants came and went, and they all... I think there were like 4 different tenants that came during that period of time. 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it all worked in some way. It all worked, and it was clearly an elevated experience, a learning experience for everyone. I'm certain they never experienced a landlord like me. And, I mean, some of the conversations were wonderful. They were just incredible. And, you know, because I was able to say yes and be encouraging and gentle, but I was also able to be firm and say no. And say it firmly when I needed to, and you know, to really call them on something that was inappropriate or unacceptable, and to be able to do it in a way that didn't degenerate into negativity and stuff. You know, there was an understanding that we shared. So that's what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah.
But you see how none of that can unfold, can develop, without you recognizing first and foremost that the problem is mine.
Right.
You know? And it's completely reasonable for my employer to want me to be on time. Mm-hmm. It's completely reasonable. And now here's the kicker, and your ego may not like this, that's the least I can do. And that is no less important. Just showing up on time is no less important than all the wonderful work I do in my program that I'm responsible for.
My ego doesn't like it.
Yeah, of course, because we all want to be special, you know, and we all want to try to trade on our specialness, and that doesn't work. You get to be right, and you get to be special, and everybody sees you as a prima donna or a pain in the ass, or they don't like you for some reason, or they resent you, you know.
Well, I get what you're saying, you know, when you say get with the way it is.
First.
And that's it. You know, it's not about me or them or anything.
Yes,
It's
just what they're asked, what I've already agreed to do.
And
When I took the
so-
job, I agreed to do that.
So that sort of calms me down, I think, and calms the noise about.
Definitely, it'll get you out of all that upset, which generally is an invitation to anger, to come in, and for you to be angry about the situation or about your boss or about them, as you know, them their sons of bitches. You know, you need a way out of that.
Yeah.
Because that gets in the way of your best work. And your best work
it's
involves,
draining.
it's draining to you, it's diminishing to you,
Right.
and ultimately it makes an issue about something that there should be no issue about because you already agreed to show up on time.
Right.
You took the job, and you took the job under those conditions. You didn't take the job under the conditions that, well, I'll get in and I'll then just start
I'll get
showing
it done
up.
as long as I do it however I feel like doing it. That wasn't the agreement.
Yeah, and what you'll discover if you really allow that kind of illumination to come in, it'll ultimately get you to lighten up and relax about it. You'll see some humor in it, but it'll make you stronger about everything and more able to see that same distorting influence in other areas of your life.
Right. Yeah,
You
and
know?
it's interesting. The distortion is like, well, I just can't do it, you know, for some reason, which is not true. It's just a thought pattern.
Yeah.
Because I came here on time, or
Sure.
you know, I can.
Many times you have been on time.
Right. So it's just a thought. It's part of the whole cycle of.
Yeah.
I'm only sharing this because it seems to fit with the theme of the evening.
Sure.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It does, and it also it gives us all a practical way to take a lot of these very abstract ideas like responsibility and God and perfect love and really see the utility of that kind of unconditional acceptance operating in my world, you know?
Right.
You know, just because I'm somebody that's almost never late.
I know. Yes.
It's interesting because, like, for me, it's like if I'm late, I feel panicky. And so I think it's, you know, just growing up around my mother, she was never late, you know, and it was like, you know, the church would be like 3 minutes away by car and we would leave 15 minutes before. You know, this is how she was and this is sort of how I am. And with my ex-girlfriend, she tended to be late for a lot of things. And I could see the pattern that would go on. You know, she had to go teach somebody guitar, and you know, it would be, let's say, 45 minutes to go to get there, and about 50 minutes before she decided, oh yeah, I think I should really print that thing out for that person. And then she'd go and try to print it, and the printer wouldn't be quite working, and then she'd get to the train, and she'd text me, the train is late. And and I don't have their number, and she'd panic the whole way there, and then she'd come home and really complain about the train, and also saying, "Yeah, I've got to work on my lateness," but it would be hidden, you know, these thoughts of, well, maybe I could do this, but shouldn't I be getting ready? Like, because in my mind, I'd be thinking, shouldn't she be getting ready? I mean, because I'd be getting ready,
Right.
Yeah.
Way before. You know, I'd print the thing way earlier.
Right.
I mean, this is like what I would do, and I'd see her not doing that, and I think, well, I think she's going to be late, you know, and it's going to be a panic scene here. Let me just retreat into my bedroom, you know.
Yeah.
But, well, I mean, that's you know,
Well, that's
that's when
inside
you
the
start to
project
see it. You
cycle.
start to see
Yeah.
it if you want to see it.
Right.
But if
Right.
she, you know, when she come home and blame the MTA, I'd be like, I'm sorry, it's not the MTA. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, now, and simultaneously, in and of itself, being on time is just being on time.
Right.
It's not, doesn't make you special or better
Sure,
either.
yeah.
You can't trade on that. It's part of a package.
Right.
And the package is your life opportunity to express who you are. And the only question is whether I'm expressing who I really am or some diminished, distorted version of it.
Right.
You know, wherein I try to trade on it and get away with something or make myself, you know, rather than just show up and allow the presence of myself to do to make the case.
Mm-hmm.
Just as that's why the Buddhists say, people ask questions in the Buddhist culture, well, how do I, and how does it, and the Buddhists say, chop wood and carry water.
Mm-hmm.
Chop wood and carry water, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how like in the Karate Kid, that Ralph Macchio character, wax on, wax off. Right, the karate teacher, that's all he teaches them.
Yeah.
Waxing his car. Right, the kid, every question the kid has about karate, he just answers by saying to the kid, wax on, wax off. That's it. Just do that. Now, of course, from that, once the kid stops resisting that, then he starts learning about karate, and lo and behold, it just turns out that the wax on and wax off move is a very fundamental movement that you can use very effectively in the maneuvers of expressing karate. Right? But the kid has to get past his resistance to waxing the master's car until he can actually learn about karate, because until then it's all resistance. So whatever you resist persists, and ultimately the persistence of it is a great opportunity if you know how to see it. Mm-hmm. Because it's an opportunity to go unconditional. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing that works in the human experience, is the unconditional in you. Any of that tit for tat stuff, any of that egotistical trading on my gifts and being special just collapses everything, and everything is diminished by it, and becomes some version of all that boring stuff. Your only hope is to show up with the lights on. And that means without resistance, and keeping my agreement, even if I still have a lot of activity going on or energy going on about, I don't think I should have to do this.
It's all the same practice. Ultimately.
Yeah.
There's nothing different.
No. Every time I sit down and I play guitar, it's another episode of my mind. It's another episode of, confronting my beliefs that I can't do this, or I'll never be able to do that, or, and just, there are days where it's like I feel so much resistance to just playing. But the answer is always just play. And if I just sit there and play, in short order, something happens, and all of a sudden I'm doing the thing I didn't think I could do. And it sounds pretty good. Because I'm without all that chaotic resistance having to do with the way I see it. And being right about it. So each of us are learning the lessons of how to be unreasonable in a spiritual way, which is really and truly to be reasonable with ourselves. It's a way to rise up and align with the perfect principle that's within you and your greatest ally, providing you with the ability to live your life and to allow your life to live in you and through you, and to present unequivocal, clear, transformative evidence of what you are and who you are. You see, you catch these glimpses into the wonderment of your own soul and just into how true it is beyond my mind, my worldly mind, and the stuff I think. Mm-hmm. Everything I'm really looking for is beyond all that. So, you know, the big deal aspect of your life will unfold and become plain to you and evident to you if you don't make a big deal of it. If you don't make a big deal about it in any way, for or against anything.
Yes, very true. I had an experience like that recently. This last week, I went out to Oregon for my father's 80th birthday, and normally there's a lot of it was sort of a family reunion as well, and normally there's a lot of tension about who's sleeping where in the house, and when is everybody getting there, and the whole
sure,
thing.
The family
and
stuff.
I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it, so I decided to just, at the last minute, I realized I could make it. I arranged everything. And I hadn't confirmed, so I decided to make it a surprise.
You're showing up?
Yeah. So, but it just it was such a game changer for me because I didn't know where I was going to sleep, and I didn't know, who's going to pick me up at the airport, all kinds of things, and it just allowed things to just unfold without any tension. And I ended up sleeping in the same room as my brother, which would never have happened, and that sort of unfolded other things, and it just
lovely.
It was just such a great lesson. And
yeah, see, when you work, when you effort in that direction, when you lean in that direction of the unconditional, you have a lot more options.
Yeah.
And it gives you a kind of spontaneity, and a kind of intuitive spontaneity that allows you to show up in situations uniquely different. Even though you'll look the same, you may sound the same, and you may even do the same thing.
Right.
But there'll be something different about it.
There's an ease to it, and just a lightness that...
And there's a lot to be said. There's more in that ease than just ease. It speaks volumes of a deeper and greater principle, having to do with the unconditional in you, who you really are. This unattached, eternal, infinitely creative, beautiful experience of yourself. It'll just because what you are as a soul is miraculous. And it is that miraculous energy, presence, that can do anything and make things happen you could never have reasoned. You could never have arrived at through thinking about it and reasoning it. And ultimately, the inversion, this corrective principle that we talk about as an inversion, is where you returning to your fundamental gift inherent in your being just becomes, it gives you the license to be yourself in a very spontaneous and unique way. It reunites you with your sense of freedom.
Yeah.
And that is a powerful and compelling quality, attribute in the dynamic of what you do. That's the thing that unlocks doors and moves and causes things to happen interesting ways that no one could have foresaw. You can't even foresee it. But something happens that indicates, yeah, this is good. Yeah, I don't really have to do it my way.
Yeah.
I don't have to control it. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to
arrange it or
yeah, there's a way. I'll never know what that way is, but that in no way blocks me from expressing it, from being a witness to it, from being an agent for it. You know, because as over and over again, Jesus says in the Course, you don't have to understand anything. In fact, if you get out of the business of trying to understand it in the way you always try to understand things, a greater understanding will unfold within you. So, and that understanding is that alignment. It's that ascending quality that you share with God. It's the right here, right now business of knowing thyself and to thine own self being true. And anybody can do that. Why people resist a void that is incomprehensible? Because what goes along with that little bit of willingness is deep and abiding, consistent, comforting, insightful experience that, you know, literally is beyond words and beyond history and beyond those historical associations we tend to restrict ourselves by and with. So responsibility, showing up, being yourself, being accountable, non-judgmentally accountable, and giving up the illusion of specialness, and recognizing what I'm signing up for, what I've signed up for, so that I don't diminish my own credibility and my own efforts by compromising what I already agreed to. So, okay. I'm pretty much done. I don't even feel like we need to read anything or, you know.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Because it, you know, gives us a perfect way to bring it right into practice, something practical, something as simple and as practical as showing up on time. You know, who would ever have thought that that could be an expression of the miraculous, but it can.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's true that everything, as you gain responsibility, you start to see in yourself and others like how it's all connected.
Totally.
The responsibility and the irresponsibility. You see both.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, often with myself, just, I'll see in someone else, oh, they're not getting that done. They said they were going to get that done, and it's like, yeah, but aren't there many things that I said I was going to get done? Yeah,
what am I not getting done?
It's like that you start to just automatically, you know what, I'm not going to throw that stone at that person because I've done that. I'm like that too.
That hurts me.
Yeah, and I need to also take responsibility and practice. And maybe sharing that with them would help them and me if it's done gently and
absolutely, and it will.
Yeah,
I mean, it will. We would be most useful and very practical to have more episodes of unconditional, out of this world expression in the form of whatever it comes up in. You know, like the other night I was playing on Saturday night, and this couple that's come in numerous times to hear me play, they wanted to talk, and they came in just as I finished playing. I was taking a break from my first set, so I sat down with them to have a lemonade and to have some soup and something to eat, and the conversation just quickly got pretty deep, and it, I mean, there were a whole lot of unusual things that got expressed in a short period of time. And, I was as honest and as direct as I could possibly be, as unassuming, and, I didn't try to convince them of anything. I just was honest with them. And, it invariably brought up some things that it seemed as if they wanted me to agree with. I was presenting unconditional thought, ideology to them, and that usually brings up the limitations that we adhere to in having to do with the conditions that we are more, for one reason or another, not willing to go beyond. And, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to take those steps in a unassuming way, not expecting them to follow me or to agree with me or any of that stuff, but to just, sort of answer the question in whatever form seemed to be most useful, So I'm kind of interested and curious to see them again and, see what comes from that, because that was a clear departure in many ways from the more socially comfortable exchanges that I've had with them in the past. And, I had the definite experience that I was very gentle and unassuming, and I didn't in any way pressure them or tried to convince them of anything. I just sort of let my experience present itself, and it trusted that it would mean whatever was useful for them, and for me not to look for, gravitate for, or try to solicit any responses from them that in any way might fit what I thought would be the desirable outcome. So it was just this wow, that's a different point of view, kind of exchange. And then I went and I played, and I just said, there are some conversations that are beyond words, and I think I should go play. And that's what I did. So. Anyway, so
great, thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. I'm really glad you came. I wonder what happened to